Hi guys, you are welcome once again to our second episode of our e-learning program. I'm Uncle Gideon, the facilitator for English language. Alright, so in our previous episode, we started talking about active and passive voices. So we are continuing from there, or from where we ended in our previous episodes. But a short or a brief recap of what we learned in our previous episode. We talked about what voices are, where we learned that the active voice is the normal voice we use in our daily speech. And the passive voice also changes the form of the active voice. We got to know that in the active voice, our focus is on the doer of the action. But in the passive voice, our focus shifted from the doer of the action to the receiver of the action. So, and then we move on from there and learned how to change active voice to passive voices. Don't forget, we said that to change it, or in dealing with active and passive voices, we don't do away with our verb tenses. So we treated 3 of the verb tenses on how to change active voice to passive voice. That is where we talked about the simple present tense, the simple past tense, and the simple future tense. So today, we are moving on to the next tense. So we have the present continuous tense. Now, how do we form the passive voice of the present continuous tense? First and foremost, the active voice in a sentence, you will have the subject, is, are, or am, and V1. And this time the V1 is the ing form of the V1. Don't forget, V1 is present tense. But this time around, it is the ing form of the present tense. Plus your object. That is in a present continuous tense form. So when you are changing it to the passive voice, as we learned earlier, that the subject and the object will change places or positions. So that is what we see here. Now you have the object plus is or are or am plus being plus V3 plus by plus the subject. We've already talked about the by and the subject already. So the only thing that changes here is the being and the V3. Don't forget, we said that V3 is the past participle of the verb. Okay, so that is how to change the present continuous tense verb to the passive voice form. In the second step, we will have not, or we can have not in the sentence. That is the subject, is, are, or am, plus not, plus the V1, that is the ing form, plus the object. Don't forget that. So in a sentence where you have the not, this is how you will change it. Now the object plus is, are, or am, this time the not will come before the being, plus the V3 plus by plus subject. So the only thing that changes here is the not. So take note of it. Take a clear notice of it. And the last one, last but not the least, that is when the sentence is an interrogative statement, that is a question in the present continuous tense form. The is, are, am plus subject plus V1, that is the ing form, plus objects, and then your question mark. This is an interrogative statement. So when we have an interrogative statement in an active voice, how do we change it to the passive voice? The SR or am maintain its position, plus object, plus V3, plus by, plus the subject, and then your question mark. So these are the ways in which you change the active voice of present continuous tense form to the passive voice. So let's move on to the next and then check out some examples. Okay, so example 1. We have active, that is Ellis is singing a song. Ellis is the subject. We have the is, it is agreeing to Ellis because it is singular. Singing, that is the present continuous form of the verb. A song. The song here is the object. So the passive voice, we have a song is being sung by Ellis. So as you can see, the song and Ellis have changed positions. We have our being there, which is telling us that we have changed from active to passive voice. To the second example, Ruby is not chopping vegetables. Ruby is not chopping vegetables. To the passive voice, vegetables are not being chopped by Ruby. Vegetables are not being chopped by Ruby. So vegetables in the active voice is the object, but in the passive voice it takes the position of the subject. And then Ruby, being the doer of the action, that is the subject in the active voice, is now taking the position of the object in the passive voice. The last but not the least example, that is the interrogative statement. Is Ima buying a table? Is Ima buying a table? Now changing it to the passive voice. Is a table being bought by Ima? Is a table being bought by Ima? So, in the first statement or the first example, we have the first form. In the second example, we have the negative form of the statement. And in the third example, we have the interrogative statement of the active and the passive voice. I believe you've understood this. So, let's move on to our next tense. All right. So, our next tense is the present perfect tense. Present perfect tense. So, in the positive statement, we will have the subject plus has or have plus V3 plus the object plus the object. Subject plus has or have plus V3 plus object. V3 is the past participle. So when we are changing a positive statement in the present perfect tense to the passive voice, we have object plus has or have plus being plus V3 plus by plus subject. Don't forget, the by and subject, they are always constant. And then the V3 is always constant in the passive voice, irrespective of the type of tense. All right. So, we move on to the negative statement. The negative statement. We have the subject plus has or have plus not plus V3 plus object. Now, take note of this. I've said this before and I'm saying it again. Whenever you have has or have in a sentence, the verb that follows must be V3. That is the past participle. Take note of that. All right. So in changing the negative statement from active to passive, we get object plus has or have plus not plus been plus V3 plus by plus subject. I believe you understand this. All right. So what if the statement is an interrogative statement in the present perfect tense? You have has or have beginning the statement plus subject plus V3 plus object. And then your question mark. Changing the interrogative statement of active voice to the passive voice. We have has or have plus object plus been plus V3 plus by plus subject. So this is how we change present perfect tense from active voice to the passive voice. Positive statement, negative statement, and interrogative statement. Let's take some examples. Example 1. Nitesh has challenged her. That is the active voice. Nitesh has challenged her. Changing a positive statement of active to passive. She has been challenged by Nitesh. She has been challenged by Nitesh. In the active voice, Nitesh is the subject. Has. We chose has over have because Nitesh is singular. And like I said earlier, has or have is always followed by V3. So challenged her. So when her is taking the position of the subject, it changes to she. Don't forget when we learned the subject or the subjective form of the pronouns and the objective forms of pronouns. All right, so she has been challenged by Nitesh. Example 2, that is the negative statement. Radhika has not written an article. Radhika has not written an article. To the passive voice, an article has not been written by Radhika. An article has not been written by Radhika. Now, to the third example, that is interrogative statement. Have they left the apartment? Have they left the apartment? Changing it to the passive voice, here somebody may ask, why did we use have here and here we are using has? We used have here because it is responding to the they. They is plural. That is why we used have. But here apartment is singular, so we use has. So, has apartment been left by them? Has apartment been left by them? We can take some more examples here. That is the positive statement. She has created this masterpiece. She has created this masterpiece. To the passive voice, This masterpiece has been created by her. This masterpiece has been created by her. I have read the newspaper. I have read the newspaper. To the passive voice, the newspaper has been read by me. The newspaper has been read by me. I believe with these examples, you have understood how to change the active voice of the past or the present perfect tense to the passive voice. All right, so we move on to the next verb tense. So our next verb tense is the past continuous tense. The past continuous tense. Don't forget, we have already dealt with the simple past tense. So with the past continuous tense, the active voice, in the positive statement, we have subject plus was or were plus V1, the ing form of V1 plus object. Subject plus was or were plus the V1, the ing form of V1 plus object. To the passive voice, we have object plus was or were plus being plus V3 plus by plus subject. Plus by plus subject. That is for the positive statement. Now to the negative statement, we have subject plus was or were plus not. Don't forget that not makes the statement negative. Plus V1, that is the ing form of V1 plus object. Subject plus was or were plus not plus the ing form of V1 plus object. To the passive voice, we have object plus was or were plus not plus being plus V3 plus by and then the subject. Object plus was or were plus not plus being plus V3 plus by and then subject. All right. So the last but not the least, that is the interrogative statement in the past continuous tense form. We have was or were beginning the statement plus subject plus the ing form of the V1 and then object and then your question mark. Here we are using the ing form of V1 because it is continuous tense. Very good. So to the passive voice, we have was or were plus object plus being plus V3, the by, and then subject. And then don't forget your question mark. Was or were plus object plus being plus V3 plus by plus subject and then your question mark. So we've seen how to change active voice in the past continuous tense form when the statement is positive, when the statement is negative, and when the statement is interrogative. So let's move on and check out some examples. All right. So example 1, that is a positive statement. In the active form, Nitika was painting the wall. Nitika was painting the wall. In the passive voice, we have the wall was being painted by Nitika. We used was here because wall is singular. The wall was being painted by Netika. To the second example, Mensa or Manish was repairing the car. Very sorry about that. Manish was repairing the car. Another positive statement. Passive voice, the car was being repaired by Manish. The car was being repaired by Manish. Now, interrogative. Were you reciting the poem? Were you reciting the poem? To the passive voice, was the poem being recited? Was the poem being recited? I will explain to you in our next episode the reason why we didn't bring the by and the subject. This is not wrong. We could have added the by and the subject, but this is the short form of the passive. We have the long form. The long form is where we add the by and the subject, but the short form we can choose to ignore the subject. All right, so was the poem being recited? Now to the next example. She was baking the cake. She was baking the cake. The passive voice. The cake was being baked by her. The cake was being baked by her. To our last but not the least example. She was watching me. She was watching me. The me is now changing to subject. So it changes from me to I. So I was being watched by her. I was being watched by her. And I believe with these examples too, you will be able to change the past continuous tense form of the passive or the active voice to the passive voice. So on this note, we bring this second episode to a close. Don't forget, stay home, stay safe, wash your hands with soap under running water. Spread calm and not fear. This too shall pass. Thank you.